Stripped bare before the kingdom, Lila stood at the mercy of an unforgiving tradition. Every eye was on her, waiting for her to break. Every wolf in the grand hall, including the council, had decided her fate. To them, she was nothing more than a tool to be used and discarded. She wasn't even supposed to survive the Bloodline altar. But what if the altar had other plans? Lila's knees buckled against the cold stone floor, the sharp edge of the ritual circle digging into her skin. Every eye in the grand hall of Silvermoon Pack was upon her, watching as she was dragged toward the Bloodline altar. Her heart hammered in her chest as rough hands tore at her servant's dress, exposing her to the judgment of the pack. This is how it ends, she thought bitterly. A servant, humiliated, convicted of a crime she never committed, standing before a trial that would only ever see her as worthless. Councilwoman Phelan's sharp gaze bore into her like a dagger. Strip her down to nothing but shame. Let the altar see what she truly is. Worthless. She sneered, her voice echoing across the hall. The pack, hundreds of wolves, let out a collective jeer. The laughter that followed sent a wave of humiliation crashing over Lila, her hands clutching uselessly at the shredded fabric of her dress, trying to hold on to some semblance of dignity. But the more she struggled, the more the pack's laughter grew. Her breath caught as they dragged her closer to the altar, the massive obsidian stone looming ahead. The Bloodline altar, known to burn away the unworthy, was the pack's ultimate form of justice. It was said to annihilate anyone who did not carry the pure blood of the pack's ancient line, those of noble wolf heritage untainted by human blood. And for someone like Lila, half human, half wolf, she was an abomination in their eyes. The law was clear. Half-breeds were disposable. Her mere existence, to the wolves of Silvermoon, was a crime. Her heart sank. The nightshade, the poison that nearly killed Prince Torin, had been found in her quarters, planted there by someone with enough power to frame her. But no one cared about the truth. No one cared that she'd been serving in the kitchens for years, quietly, obediently, never once stepping out of line. "Please," Lila whispered, her voice barely rising above the din of mockery. But her plea was swallowed up by the jeering crowd, drowned out by the cruel laughter that surrounded her. "You thought your blood would save you," Phelan spat, circling her like a predator. "You thought that being a half-breed would protect you from the consequences of your actions, but the Bloodline altar will burn you, girl. It will reveal what you truly are." Her words, sharp and cutting, made Lila's blood run cold. It burns them from the inside out. Their own tainted blood boils until there's nothing left but ash. Phelan's voice echoed in her mind. Lila closed her eyes, remembering a story she'd overheard in the kitchens years ago. A rogue wolf, a murderer, had once touched the altar and screamed for 7 minutes before his body had simply come apart. The stench of his charred remains had lingered in the air for days. As they forced her to her knees before the altar, Lila's body trembled. She could feel the ancient stone beneath her palm, cold and unyielding. She prayed silently to the moon goddess. "If you're real, if you care about truth at all, don't let me die like this. Don't let them win." The obsidian surface felt even colder now, like it was waiting for something more than her touch. The crowd fell silent, the anticipation hanging heavy in the air. And then, just as the guards grabbed her wrist to force her hand to the bloodline mark at the altar's peak, a voice cut through the tension. "Wait!" The word rang out across the hall like a blade slicing through silk, and the entire room froze. Every wolf in the hall, from the lowliest servant to the most powerful council member, stood still. Even Councilwoman Phelan, who had been so sure of Lila's fate, halted, her expression shifting from smug triumph to something darker. Lila twisted her neck, trying to see who had spoken. A sharp, deep sound filled the hall, heavy footsteps echoing across the stone floor. The crowd parted like water, and every wolf dropped to one knee, instinctively bowing in reverence. She could barely breathe as the figure emerged from the shadows, tall and imposing. It was Prince Torin, the Crown Prince himself. Alive. Lila's heart skipped a beat. She had believed the rumors. She had thought him dead. He had been poisoned, the same poison that was now being used to frame her. But here he stood, very much alive, his golden eyes burning with fury. He strode toward her, the raw power of his presence making every wolf in the room shift uncomfortably. His shoulders were broad, his muscles honed by years of training, and his hair, dark as midnight, cascaded just past his shoulders. His eyes fixed on her, those golden eyes, sharp, calculating, and full of the hunt. Could he see the truth? Could he see that she was innocent? "You should be resting," Phelan said quickly, bowing low to him. "The poison is out of my system." Prince Torin's voice was a deep growl, commanding and firm. "I'm well enough to witness an execution, assuming, of course, that execution is warranted." The silence stretched on. The tension was palpable, each wolf in the room holding their breath. The prince's gaze never wavered from Lila as he stepped closer, his golden eyes assessing her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "She had nightshade in her quarters," Phelan continued, desperation creeping into her voice. "She served your meals. She had opportunity, means. She is the one who poisoned you, Your Highness." Prince Torin turned his gaze to Councilwoman Phelan, and for a moment the air shifted. His jaw clenched, his posture rigid with the weight of what was to come. "So did half the palace staff," he said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Yet you've singled out one half-breed servant girl for this particular honor. Why? What makes her so special that she deserves the altar rather than a trial?" The crowd shifted nervously, but Lila remained motionless, her heart racing. She couldn't speak. She didn't know what to think, much less what to feel. Prince Torin's gaze landed on her again, his eyes searching hers with a mixture of confusion and something else, something he seemed unwilling to acknowledge. "Tell me, servant, what is your name?" he asked, his voice softer now. Almost gentle. Lila swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had no choice but to respond, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lila." At the mention of her name, a murmur rippled through the pack. Lila Thorne. The Thorne name carried weight, a name that hadn't been spoken in years, not since her father had been exiled for his forbidden love with a human woman. Her heart sank as she heard the whispers. "Thorne," Prince Torin repeated, his gaze sharp now with recognition. "She's your niece, isn't she, councilwoman? The daughter of your brother, from his relationship with a human woman, a bloodline you've tried to erase from history." Phelan's face twisted with disgust. "She dares to claim our name?" Torin's eyes flashed with something fierce and unyielding. "She doesn't claim it. It's hers by birth." He turned to Lila, his words firm but not unkind. "Isn't that right, Lila?" Lila's mind raced as she processed the revelation. Her father's bloodline, the Thorne name, was now her birthright. She wasn't just the half-breed servant anymore. She was connected to one of the oldest, most respected families in the pack. But did that mean she was worthy of survival? Would the altar accept her? Or was she truly the abomination they all claimed her to be? If you believe everyone deserves to be treated fairly, hit subscribe. Only those who side with injustice will stay silent. Don't let the pack's cruelty go unchallenged. Stand with Lila. Stand for what's right. Lila's heart raced as she faced the Bloodline altar, every wolf in the hall watching with bated breath. The weight of the moment heavy in the air. She could feel the cold obsidian beneath her palm, the stone pulsing like it was alive, waiting for her to make the first move. The pack's cruel laughter had died down, replaced by an eerie silence. Every eye was on her, including Prince Torrens, whose golden gaze held her captive. Could she survive this? Could she prove them wrong? With a shaky breath, Lila closed her eyes, then slowly, deliberately, pressed her palm against the bloodline mark. She knew the moment she touched it, the magic of the altar would either claim her as worthy or burn her away into nothing. The fate of her life, and perhaps her bloodline, depended on this one act. For a brief moment, nothing happened. The room remained still, and then a surge of raw, blinding power exploded from the altar. Lila's breath was stolen from her as the intense light hit her, swirling in a burst of silver and crimson, blinding everyone in the hall. She felt the power course through her, not as pain, but as something more, something vast, terrifying, and ancient. The altar seemed to drink in the light, and for a brief, frozen moment, time stood still. The bond snapped into place. A shocking wave of recognition hit her heart, like a pulse, a thread tying her soul to someone else's, someone she could feel inside her very being. The sensation was overwhelming, a force she couldn't control, as if the universe itself had drawn a line between her and someone else, someone incredibly powerful. The pack gasped, their murmurs rising in a cacophony of disbelief. She felt it then, a shift in the atmosphere. A sense of awe and fear spread across the hall like wildfire. Wolves dropped to their knees. They didn't do it because they were forced to, but because they couldn't help it. The bloodline altar had recognized something, and it wasn't just any bloodline. It was something far more important, a mate bond. And in that moment, Lila realized she wasn't just a servant girl. She wasn't just a half-breed caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The altar had declared her fate, and it had bound her to none other than Prince Torren, the heir to the throne. Torren's face went pale. He took a step back, his body rigid as if someone had struck him. The golden light of his eyes dimmed slightly in disbelief. "No," he whispered, his voice carrying an edge of desperation. "That's not possible." Lila blinked, her mind struggling to make sense of what had just happened. She could still feel him, the prince, but it wasn't just his presence. It was his emotions, his shock, his confusion. She could feel everything he felt, as if their souls had been permanently linked. Her heartbeat matched his, their worlds suddenly intertwined. Before she could process the enormity of what had just happened, a voice, strong, authoritative, and filled with anger, cut through the chaos. "Impossible." Lila turned to find Alpha Caden, the tall, broad-shouldered man who stood with an imposing presence near the back of the hall. He stepped forward, his eyes flashing with disbelief and frustration. "This is an abomination," he growled, his voice dripping with anger. "You cannot seriously expect us to believe that the prince is fated to mate with her." He pointed at Lila, his words laced with venom. The entire room shifted, whispers erupting like wildfire. The pack was divided, some still kneeling in reverence, while others murmured in disbelief. The pack had always been steeped in traditions, bloodlines, and hierarchies that left little room for half-breeds. Lila had always known she was nothing in their eyes. Until now. Until the bond had snapped into place, irrevocably changing her life. But she had no time to contemplate this. She could feel Torrens' emotions, his confusion, his disbelief, but also something else. Something more profound. A desire to protect her. But why? Lila struggled to find her footing, her legs weak beneath her as the sudden rush of power surged through her veins. Her head spun, the energy from the altar overwhelming her senses. She had never felt this strong, this connected to the world around her. She had never felt alive in the way she did now. "It's true, Caden," came a voice, Lunavera's, calm yet commanding. The elder wolf stepped forward, her silver hair glinting in the torchlight. Her sharp green eyes flicked between Lila and the prince, a knowing look on her face. "She carries original blood, Omega Prime. She is the fated mate of Prince Torren. The altar has spoken. There is no going back now." The room fell silent. Lila's heart skipped a beat as she tried to process the weight of Lunavera's words. Omega Prime? Was that what she really was? The power that now surged through her wasn't just some trick of the altar. It was real. But what did it mean? What kind of power did she possess? "This isn't right." Caden's voice was filled with frustration and disbelief. "The pack cannot accept this. The prince is bound to someone worthy of him, not some half-breed servant who doesn't even have the bloodline to match." Lila winced at his words. Half-breed servant. Those words stung, but she was too shaken to respond. She wasn't just some servant girl anymore. She had no idea what was happening to her, but it was too much to deny now. The bond was real. She was Prince Torren's mate. Torren stepped forward, his face still pale, and then, slowly, deliberately, he turned his golden eyes to her. "I didn't ask for this," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "I didn't want this. I didn't want to be bound to anyone, especially not you." Lila felt the sting of his words, but she didn't falter. She wasn't just a servant girl anymore. She was something more, something the moon goddess had chosen, something that connected her with the prince in a way neither of them could understand. And she had no choice but to face it head on. "I never asked for this bond either," Lila whispered, her voice shaking as she met his gaze. "But here we are, and now we have to figure out what comes next." Torren's eyes softened for a moment, his gaze flicking away from her before meeting her eyes again. "This isn't over, Lila," he said, his tone more uncertain now. "I don't know what this means, but I do know one thing. I'll figure it out. I will protect you." Alpha Caden wasn't done yet. "No one can protect her now. Not from me." And so, the battle lines were drawn. Lila's new reality wasn't just about surviving the pack's cruel traditions. It was about surviving Prince Torren's legacy, the pack's unspoken rules, and the blood that ran through her veins. A bloodline she didn't fully understand, but now had to embrace. But in that moment, standing in front of the bloodline altar, with Torren's golden eyes fixed on her and the weight of the pack's disbelief bearing down on her, she felt something shift. The moon goddess had bound them together, and no matter what the pack thought, no matter what her future held, she wasn't backing down now. She was done being afraid. The moonlight streamed through the tall, arched windows of the royal chambers, casting long shadows across the stone floors. Lila stood by the window, gazing out at the vast expanse of the Silver Moon Pack's territory. She had never seen it from this perspective before. From the servants' quarters, everything looked different, far away, cold, and distant. But from here, from the prince's chambers, she could see it all. The rolling hills, the thick forests, and the distant mountains that stood as silent sentinels around the pack's domain. Her heart felt heavy in her chest. A half-breed, she had been all her life, nothing more than a shadow in the eyes of the wolves. Yet here she stood, no longer invisible. She wasn't just any servant. She was Prince Torrhen's fated mate, the woman bound to him by the powerful forces of the moon goddess. The bond had snapped into place in the grand hall, and now, despite everything she had once known about her place in the world, she had to face the reality that her life had changed forever. The moment the bond was forged, she could feel it, an invisible thread connecting her to Torrhen. It was like a pulse, a rhythm that ran through her veins, syncing with his heartbeat. She could feel his presence, feel his emotions as though they were her own. It was overwhelming, terrifying, but it was undeniable. They were mates. But he, Torrhen, wasn't ready for this. She could sense the distance in his emotions, the resistance, the struggle. It was almost as if he was repelling the connection, fighting against it, unable to accept it. He had never seen her as anything more than a servant. The door creaked open behind her, and Lila turned to see Torrhen enter, his tall frame casting a shadow in the doorway. His golden eyes, usually fierce with authority, were clouded with confusion, doubt, and something else she couldn't quite place. He closed the door softly behind him and stood for a moment, just watching her, as if unsure of how to proceed. Lila's heart fluttered, a mix of emotions rushing through her. This was it, the moment they had to confront the bond, confront what had just been revealed to the entire pack. "Torrhen," she said, her voice low and hesitant. "We need to talk." He nodded stiffly, his posture rigid, as though he was still trying to maintain control over his emotions. "I know," he muttered. "I know we need to talk." They stood in silence for a few long seconds, both of them processing the enormity of the situation. Lila couldn't bear the tension anymore, so she spoke again, her voice cracking under the weight of everything she wanted to say. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for any of it. But I can't deny what I feel. The bond. It's real. I feel you, Torrhen. I feel everything. But you're pulling away." Torrhen's jaw clenched, and he looked away, his eyes distant. "I didn't ask for this either, Lila. I don't know what to do with this bond. I never saw you as anything more than a servant. You're nothing like the women I thought I would. Well, I never thought I would feel anything like this for you." His words stung more than Lila was ready for, but she held her ground, refusing to let him see her hurt. She had been used to rejection, used to being looked down upon, but this was different. This bond wasn't something either of them had chosen. "I never wanted this either, Torrhen," she replied, her voice strong, though the words tasted like ash. "But the bond is here now, and it's not something we can just ignore. I know you're struggling with it. I can feel your doubts, your confusion, but we have no choice but to face this." Torrhen stepped closer, his golden eyes searching hers with a mixture of anger and sadness. "I don't want to be tied to you. I don't want to be bound to someone who doesn't belong in my world. You're half human, Lila. You're not part of our pack, not part of this life. You're not like me." Lila swallowed the lump in her throat, trying to steady herself. The words hurt, yes, but she had known them. They had always been there, lurking in the shadows. She had always been half-breed, always an outsider. I know, she said quietly, her gaze dropping to the floor. But that doesn't change the bond. It doesn't change what's happening between us. The altar accepted me. It claimed me. And I don't know what that means, but it's real. Torin's expression softened slightly, though the frustration and conflict in his eyes remained. I know, he said, his voice quiet now. I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to be with you. Lila felt a pang of sympathy for him. He didn't want this. He didn't want her. And who could blame him? To be bound to a half-breed servant, it was the stuff of nightmares for someone like him. But in that moment, Lila understood something crucial. The bond wasn't just about him. It was about them. Together. Whether they liked it or not, the bond was a part of their fate now. Maybe you'll never be ready for this, she said softly. Maybe you'll never see me the way I see you. But we don't have a choice, Torin. We're mates. And there's nothing we can do to change that. The silence that followed was thick, charged with so many unspoken emotions. Lila could feel Torin's struggle, his duty as crown prince, his loyalties to his pack, and his growing awareness of just how deeply the bond had connected them. But she also felt something else, the beginning of a change. I don't know if I can be what you want me to be, he murmured, his voice hoarse. But I will try, for the pack, for this. Lila nodded, her chest tightening at the sincerity in his voice. They had a long road ahead of them, one that neither of them could predict. The bond had set them on a path that neither of them could control. Hours later, after their conversation, Lila found herself in the heart of the royal wing of the palace, standing before Luna Vera, the elder wolf who had sensed Lila's true potential when no one else had. Vera had been watching from the shadows during Lila's interaction with Prince Torin, and now it was time to face the woman who might be her only ally in this new, strange world. Luna Vera stood with her arms crossed, her silver hair gleaming in the torchlight. Her piercing green eyes studied Lila with a mixture of curiosity and expectation. Sit, Vera instructed, gesturing to the plush chair in front of her. We need to talk. Lila sat down, feeling a sudden weight settle over her. The Luna was a force of nature, and Lila wasn't sure if she was ready to understand what was coming next. But she had to. She had to learn, had to understand what the Omega Prime bloodline meant for her. You have powers, Lila, Luna Vera began, her voice low and measured. The Omega Prime bloodline you carry is ancient, more powerful than you can possibly imagine. You are not just a half-breed. You are something far more. Lila blinked, her mind reeling. Powers? Yes, Vera said, her voice steady. Omega Primes were once the most powerful wolves in the pack. They could command others, calm raging alphas, and sense emotions. Your bond with Prince Torin, it's only the beginning. There's more to you than you know. Lila felt a surge of realization. The power she had felt earlier, the energy from the altar, wasn't just a reaction. It was part of her, part of who she was now. But what did it mean? You can feel the power of the bond, can't you? Vera asked, reading her thoughts. Lila nodded. I can. It's overwhelming. You will learn to harness it, Vera said, her tone now more instructive. The bond is not just a connection to Torin, it is a connection to your true self. You have a purpose, Lila. You are more than just the prince's mate. You are Omega Prime, and it's time you started acting like it. Lila felt the weight of the words. Omega Prime, the name alone was enough to make her stomach churn with both fear and curiosity. She wasn't just a servant girl. She wasn't just a half-breed. She was something more. Something powerful. Meanwhile, across the hall, Councilwoman Phelan watched from the shadows, her lips curling into a dark smile. The revelation of Lila's bond to Torin was not something she had foreseen, but it was far from over. Phelan had always known how to use power to her advantage, and she had no intention of letting this half-breed rise to the top without a fight. She had her own plans that would ultimately see her family in power. And she would stop at nothing to ensure that the throne remained within her reach. If you believe that power doesn't come from bloodlines, but from within, comment half-breed. Only those who fear true power would oppose a half-breed finding her place. Stand with Lila. Stand for strength. The weight of the truth settled heavily on Lila's shoulders as she paced the royal chambers. She couldn't shake the feeling that everything she had believed was a lie. Since the bond had been forged in the bloodline altar, everything had changed. Her life, her identity, had been thrown into a whirlwind of chaos. But this was something else entirely. The poison that had nearly taken Prince Torin's life, that had led to her near execution, was all part of something darker than she could have ever imagined. As Lila looked out the tall windows, the sun had begun its descent, casting an orange glow over the Pax land, the same land she had once thought she would never belong to. But now, everything felt different. She belonged. And for once, despite the chaos, she was ready to fight for it. The sound of footsteps approaching broke her from her thoughts. She turned to find Prince Torin entering the room, his expression tense, his golden eyes betraying the thoughts running through his mind. They hadn't spoken much since their last conversation. There was a distance between them, one Lila didn't know how to close. It was as if their bond, though undeniable, was also a barrier they were both struggling to understand. Lila, Torin said, his voice soft but urgent. We need to talk. She nodded, her heartbeat quickening. This wasn't just about their bond. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of something far more sinister. Is it about the poisoning? She asked, her voice trembling despite herself. Torin's eyes darkened. He crossed the room to stand beside her, the weight of the moment heavy between them. He didn't need to answer. Lila knew. She had seen it in his eyes. This was the moment they would face the truth. It's worse than we thought, Torin began, his voice low. I've been investigating, and everything points back to one person, Alpha Caden. Lila's breath caught in her throat. Alpha Caden? She had heard whispers about the ambitious Alpha, Torin's uncle, but she hadn't realized just how deeply Caden's schemes ran. Caden? Lila repeated, the disbelief evident in her tone. But he's always been loyal to the crown. Torin shook his head. Not anymore. Not after what happened with the poisoning. I found the evidence, Lila. He orchestrated it all. The nightshade. The plot to frame you. He's been working against me for years, trying to undermine my rule. Lila's mind reeled. She had suspected someone had framed her, but never in her wildest dreams did she think it was someone so close to Torin. The betrayal ran deep. And it wasn't just a matter of politics. It was personal. Alpha Caden had tried to destroy everything Torin was destined to inherit. And now, Lila, as his mate, was caught in the crossfire. How do we prove it? She asked, her voice steady but filled with determination. She wasn't just going to sit back and let herself be a pawn in someone else's game. Not anymore. Torrin's expression softened. We have the letters. Caden's been writing to someone outside the pack, someone who has been helping him. The plot goes deeper than just the poisoning, Lila. There's a conspiracy to discredit me, to weaken the pack from the inside. We need to find the source, the person behind him. Lila's heart raced. This was it, the first step in taking back control of her life, of her future. She could no longer be the helpless servant. Not when the truth was within her reach. We'll expose him, Lila said, her voice firm with resolve. But we need to be careful. Caden's power stretches beyond just his bloodline. He has allies, influence. If we go after him, we need to be prepared. Torrin nodded. I know. That's why I need you, Lila. I don't trust anyone else to help me uncover this. We'll find the truth. Together. The following days were a blur of covert meetings, carefully crafted plans, and silent observations. Torrin and Lila worked side by side, trying to piece together the puzzle that was Alpha Caden's betrayal. As much as they tried to keep their investigation secret, whispers began to circulate within the palace walls. The tensions were rising, and Lila could feel it. Everyone was watching, waiting. Lila couldn't shake the feeling that Celine was behind some of it too. The former betrothed of Torrin, her jealousy was palpable, and her contempt for Lila only seemed to grow with each passing day. But Lila had other worries, and Celine's bitterness was a problem that would have to wait. Alpha Caden was the immediate threat. Torrin had managed to retrieve a set of secret letters, carefully hidden in Caden's private quarters. They had been written to an unknown recipient, someone from outside the pack, someone who had been working with Caden to undermine the royal family. The evidence was damning, and it was only a matter of time before they exposed it. But there was still one person who stood in their way. Late one night, Lila and Torrin ventured into the shadowy corridors of the pack's council hall. It was a place steeped in power and secrets, where the pack's fate was decided, where the leaders of the pack met in hushed tones and discussed matters that only the bravest dared to challenge. They had been summoned to a meeting with Councilwoman Phelan, who had been plotting against Lila from the start. Phelan was a calculating woman, skilled in the art of manipulation, and Lila had never trusted her. It was clear that Phelan had no intention of letting Lila rise to power. She would stop at nothing to discredit her and her bond with Torrin. The council chamber was empty, save for Phelan, who stood in the far corner, her eyes glinting in the dim light. She smiled as they entered, her sharp features softening with false politeness. Well, well, she purred. The half-breed finally shows her face. Lila didn't flinch. She had heard Phelan's words, but they no longer held power over her. She was done being intimidated. Torrin stepped forward, his gaze cold and unwavering. Phelan, we need to talk. Oh, I'm sure you do, Prince, Phelan said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But what exactly is it that we need to talk about? The bond? The half-breed servant who's now your fated mate? Or perhaps the betrayal that you're too afraid to face? Lila's eyes narrowed, and she took a step forward, her confidence growing. I know what you're up to, Phelan. You're working with Caden, aren't you? You've been plotting to undermine the royal family, to destabilize Torrin's rule. Phelan's smile faltered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered. You have no proof of that, Lila. You're just a servant. What could you possibly know about matters of power? Torrin's voice was sharp. We have the letters. We know you've been working with Caden to bring about my downfall. This ends now. Phelan's eyes flickered with panic, but she quickly masked it with a laugh. You think you can expose me? You think you can take me down with your petty accusations? Lila took a step forward, her voice steady and strong. We already have, Phelan. Your game is over. Your betrayal is out in the open, and there's no way for you to escape it now. The councilwoman's face twisted with rage. You think this changes anything? You think you can just walk in here and take everything from me? You're nothing, Lila. You'll never be more than a half-breed. Torin moved to stand beside Lila, his presence a quiet declaration of support. The truth will come to light, Phelan, and when it does, you will be held accountable for your actions. The tension in the room crackled, but Phelan didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked toward the shadows, her departure a clear sign that she knew her time was running out. The royal halls were a sea of tension, the air thick with the murmurs of wolves who had heard of the looming confrontation between Prince Torin and Alpha Caden. The whispers spread like wildfire, and Lila could feel the weight of their gazes, their expectations, pressing down on her shoulders. She had never imagined her life would lead to this, standing at the center of a battle for power, caught between the man she loved and the brutal ambitions of the wolf who sought to destroy him. The courtyard stretched before her, vast and imposing, the ancient stone walls bearing witness to generations of pack leaders. The Bloodline altar, once a symbol of unity and tradition, had now become a battleground where the future of the pack would be decided. Torin stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder, but his posture was tense, his eyes dark with resolve. There was no turning back now. The time had come to face Alpha Caden, the very wolf who had manipulated the pack for years, seeking to tear apart everything Torin had worked for. Are you ready? Torin's voice was low, filled with an intensity Lila had never heard before. She nodded, trying to steady her breathing. I have no choice. It wasn't long before the grand doors to the courtyard opened with a heavy creak, and Alpha Caden strode in. Tall and imposing, he moved with a predator's grace, his eyes cold and calculating. His every step spoke of power that he intended to keep at any cost. Torin, Caden's voice rang out, smooth but laced with contempt. I always knew this day would come, but I didn't think it would be like this. He looked at Lila, his expression twisted with disdain. A half-breed, and yet here you are, standing beside the prince, thinking you can take my place. You will never belong. Lila's jaw clenched at his words, but she stayed silent, standing tall by Torin's side. She knew that the pack was watching, and their perception of her mattered now more than ever. If she let Caden's cruelty go unchallenged, the damage would be done. But this was not just about her anymore. This was about Torin, the man she loved, and the pack she would one day lead, whether they liked it or not. You're wrong, Caden, Torin said, his voice carrying through the courtyard like a thunderclap. Lila belongs here. She's my mate, my chosen Luna, and nothing you say can change that. Caden's lip curled in a sneer, his golden eyes narrowing as he stepped closer, the tension crackling between them. Your bond, your relationship, it's a fluke, a mistake by the moon goddess. You know that. The pack won't stand for it. The other wolves in the courtyard stirred restlessly, their eyes flicking between the two alphas. The pack's loyalty was in question, and it wasn't clear where the true allegiance lay. Lila could feel the weight of the pack's gaze, and she knew that if the wrong choice was made here, the entire kingdom would collapse into chaos. Torin's fists clenched at his sides, his body tense with barely contained fury. You've spent your life trying to control everything. Caden, you've deceived and manipulated this pack for years, and now you want to tear it apart. But I won't let you. The pack is mine to lead, and I'm going to make sure the truth comes out. The truth? Caden scoffed. What truth, Torin? That you're not fit to lead? That you let a half-breed, a mere servant, claim your throne? Lila stepped forward, her voice cutting through the air. You don't get to decide who belongs. I don't care what blood runs through my veins. I'm here because the moon goddess chose me, and if you think I'm going to stand aside while you try to destroy everything, you're wrong. The words came out stronger than she expected, and she saw a flicker of surprise in Torin's eyes. He hadn't expected her to be the one to speak first, but now he understood. They were in this together. Caden's expression darkened. And in an instant, he shifted into his wolf form, a massive beast with dark fur and glowing eyes that burned with rage. The pack followed his lead, but Torin stood firm, his own wolf energy pulsing in the air around him. This is my challenge, Torin, Caden growled, his voice deep and guttural. Not just for the throne, but for your mate. If you want her, you'll have to prove your worth. But know this, you'll never be able to protect her. I'm going to take everything you've ever cared about and burn it to the ground. The challenge was clear, the fight inevitable. Torin's eyes locked onto Caden, a fierce determination etched into every line of his face. I don't need to prove myself to you. You're the one who's failed the pack. You've lost the support of the wolves, and now you'll pay for your betrayal. With a growl, Torin shifted into his wolf form, a powerful beast with sleek silver fur and piercing golden eyes that glowed with fierce determination. The battle that ensued was unlike anything Lila had ever witnessed. The air was thick with tension, the ground shaking beneath their feet as the two wolves clashed. Torin's power, fueled by his position as crown prince and his connection to the pack, clashed against Caden's brutal ambition. Lila watched helplessly as the two alpha wolves fought. She could feel the pull of their bond, the bond she shared with Torin, thrumming in her chest. But it wasn't enough. She needed to do something to stop Caden, to end this once and for all. It was then that she felt it, the power that had been dormant inside her for so long, her Omega Prime blood. Lila had been learning to harness her abilities under Luna Vera's guidance, but now, faced with the destruction around her, she understood that it was time to take action. Her hands trembled as she raised them, and in that moment, the power coursing through her erupted. With a sudden, explosive force, a wave of calming energy flooded the courtyard, crashing over the pack like a tidal wave. The wolves froze in their tracks, stunned by the power she wielded. Enough! Lila's voice rang out, clear and commanding, with a power she had never known she possessed. Her words echoed through the courtyard, and even Caden stopped, his wolf form tense and unsure. The entire pack stood still, their eyes fixed on her as the tension in the air dissolved, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace. Torin's gaze snapped to her, his eyes wide with awe. Lila! She turned to face him, her heart still racing from the surge of energy that had coursed through her. I can't let this continue. We need to stop him, once and for all. Caden snarled, but the power in the air held him back. You think this is over? You're just a servant, nothing more. I'm more than you'll ever understand, Lila said, her voice steady, her confidence growing with every breath. I am the future Luna, and I will protect my pack, no matter what it takes. With the pack finally subdued by her power, Lila and Torin turned their attention back to Caden. The alpha was still defiant, his wolf form bristling with frustration. But in that moment, the power shifted. The pack's loyalty had been tested, and now they had their answer. They knelt before Torin and Lila, acknowledging them as the true rulers of the pack. The future of the Shadow Pack. Caden, realizing his defeat, let out one final growl before he retreated into the shadows, vanishing from sight. The cool morning air sliced through the high windows of the royal chambers, and the faint rustle of wind outside seemed to mirror the restlessness inside the walls of the palace. The courtyard, once filled with cheers and loyalty after Torrhen's victory over Alpha Caden, now carried an unsettling quiet. Lila stood by the window, gazing out over the sprawling pack territory. The sun's rays filtered through the trees, painting the land in shades of gold, but the peace she had fought for still felt fragile, like it could be shattered at any moment. Torrhen's footsteps approached from behind, breaking her thoughts. She turned to face him, her mate, and the future king of the Shadow Pack. He was different now. The weight of leadership had settled on his broad shoulders, his golden eyes holding a sharpness that hadn't been there before. They had won the battle, but the real fight was just beginning. "You've been quiet this morning," Torrhen said, his voice low but full of concern. "Is everything all right?" Lila smiled faintly, her fingers tracing the edge of the window ledge. "Just thinking about what comes next. We've won, but I'm not sure I know what comes after that." Torrhen walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance. "You're not alone in this, Lila. We're in this together. We will face what's to come as one." She nodded, grateful for his presence, but a gnawing feeling remained in her gut. "I hope that's enough," she muttered, more to herself than to him. Just then, the door to the chamber opened and Luna Vera entered, her face as serene as always. The older wolf's silver hair was pinned back elegantly, and the way she held herself exuded authority. But there was an edge to her demeanor today, something Lila couldn't quite place. "Your Highness, Luna." Luna Vera greeted them both with a deep bow. "I've come to inform you that Alpha King Marcus is returning today." The mention of Torrhen's father immediately caught their attention. "Marcus is returning now?" Torrhen asked, his brow furrowing. "Why the sudden return?" Luna Vera's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "There's been word from the southern territories, and it seems that his return is urgent. There are matters to attend to, matters that could have significant political consequences for your reign, Torrhen." Lila exchanged a look with Torrhen. They had already been through so much. The war for the throne, the betrayal by Caden, and the shocking revelation of their mate bond. But it seemed like their troubles were far from over. "What do you mean by political consequences?" Lila asked, her voice firm. "I thought Caden's rebellion was the last of the threats we would face." Luna Vera sighed, her expression softening with empathy. "Unfortunately, the world of pack politics is never that simple. Even with Caden gone, there are rivalries, old grudges, and ambitions that won't simply fade with his defeat. Alpha King Marcus may have to make decisions that are not easy, decisions that could put your reign to the test." Lila nodded, her stomach tightening. "What kind of decisions?" "You'll know soon enough," Luna Vera said cryptically. "For now, I suggest you prepare yourself. When Marcus arrives, he will have new demands, and your position as Luna Queen will be tested." The hours passed in a blur of preparation and quiet tension. Lila couldn't shake the feeling that the ground beneath her was shifting. She had been thrust into the role of Luna Queen, but that didn't mean she had the pack's full support, or the wisdom to navigate the storm that was approaching. By the time the evening arrived, Lila found herself standing in the grand hall, the place where so much had happened, both beautiful and terrifying. She watched as the grand doors opened, and Alpha King Marcus strode in, his presence commanding attention. His broad frame and graying hair spoke of years of leadership, of a man who had seen it all. His golden eyes locked onto Torrhen, then flicked to Lila, taking her in with a measured gaze. Son, Marcus said, his voice deep and resonant. You've done well. The pack is behind you, but there are forces beyond the pack that must be dealt with. Torrin stepped forward, his expression hardening. What kind of forces, Father? Marcus regarded him with a slight smirk. Not all threats come from within the pack, Torrin. We have other packs to consider, packs that have long sought to undermine our position. I've received word from the Stone Fang pack to the north. They want an alliance, but their terms are unsatisfactory. Lila's heart skipped. The Stone Fang pack was one of the most influential and dangerous packs in the region. If they opposed Torrin, it could mean the end of his rule before it even began. What do they want? Torrin asked, his voice tight. They want marriage, Marcus replied bluntly. They want you to marry their alpha's daughter, Selena. This would solidify our alliance, but it would come at the cost of your mate bond with Lila. Lila felt her breath catch in her throat. The possibility of her relationship with Torrin being ripped apart was enough to send panic surging through her veins. But Torrin was quick to react, his golden eyes flashing with fury. That's impossible, Torrin growled. I already have my mate. The moon goddess has chosen Lila for me. I will not break that bond for a political alliance. Marcus held up a hand, his expression unreadable. I know that, son. But you must understand, there are politics in play. The Stone Fang pack is powerful, and if we refuse them, they may seek retribution. There are also rumors of the Blood Moon pack to the east making their move. The entire kingdom is in a fragile state, and the last thing we need is war. Lila felt the weight of his words like a physical force pressing against her chest. Politics, diplomacy. None of it mattered if it meant losing Torrin and the future they had fought so hard to build together. She could feel the bond between them, the strength of their connection. But would that be enough to overcome the challenges they faced? She wasn't sure. Later that evening, in the privacy of their chambers, Lila and Torrin sat together, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. I don't want to lose you, Lila said, her voice barely a whisper. I don't want to be part of this game. I didn't ask for any of this. Torrin turned to her, his eyes softening as he reached out, taking her hand in his. I know. I never wanted any of this for you either. But we don't have a choice, Lila. We need to protect the pack, and if that means making difficult decisions, then we must do it. Lila looked down at their hands, feeling the bond between them pulse gently. But what about us? What about our future? Torrin sighed, his gaze distant for a moment. The future is uncertain, Lila, but one thing is certain. I won't let anyone take you from me. Not now. Not ever. She believed him. She had to. But the political landscape was shifting, and their love might not be enough to shield them from the storm that was coming. The next day, the pack was thrown into turmoil as the council convened to discuss Marcus's proposal. Lila was summoned to attend, her role as Luna Queen now more important than ever. The whispers in the hall grew louder as she entered, the pack watching her every move. She had to hold her ground. If she faltered now, everything she and Torrin had fought for would crumble. The meeting was long and tense, filled with words and threats wrapped in layers of diplomacy. Lila felt the weight of the pack's future pressing down on her as she sat beside Torrin, listening as the council debated their options. She had no illusions. This was no longer just about love. It was about survival. As Torrin and Lila face the rising political tensions, their bond remains their greatest strength. But will it be enough to survive the storm that threatens to destroy everything? In the days ahead, they will be tested in ways they never imagined, where every choice could cost them everything they hold dear. The weight of the day pressed heavily on Lila's shoulders as she paced the royal chambers. The flickering light from the fireplace casting long shadows on the walls. Outside, the winds howled, a constant reminder of the storm raging just beyond their control. The pack had rallied behind Torin after their victory over Caden. But a new threat loomed on the horizon, one far more dangerous than any internal betrayal. Iron Ridge Pack. Lila's breath hitched at the thought. Alpha Garrett, the ruthless leader of the Northern Pack, had been a shadow in the background for too long, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, that moment had arrived. Torin, standing tall and composed by the window, glanced over his shoulder at Lila. His golden eyes were troubled, a depth of emotion that had been foreign to him only weeks ago, now visible in his every movement. The burden of leadership had been thrust upon him, and it seemed that the weight was suffocating him.
"Garrett is moving faster than I anticipated,"
Torin muttered, his voice heavy with frustration.
"He's threatening war if I don't abdicate."
Lila's pulse quickened at the words. "He wants you to step down? He wants to take over?" Torin turned fully to face her, his jaw tightening.
"Yes, he's pushing for control of the pack.
And he's not just threatening the Silvermoon Pack. His reach extends beyond us. If we don't act quickly, this could fracture the entire kingdom." Lila felt the intensity of his words settle in her chest like a stone. She had never been a politician. Her role, at least in her mind, had always been confined to supporting Torin. But now, as Luna Queen, she knew that her strength would be tested in ways she hadn't imagined. They were facing a war, and she couldn't hide behind Torin's protection anymore. Not when the stakes were this high.
"We can't let him have the pack,"
Lila said, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling up inside her. "You're the rightful heir, Torin. No one has the right to take that from you." Torin nodded, but the furrow in his brow didn't fade.
"It's not just about the throne. It's about control, about power. Garrett is no fool. He knows that a united pack is unstoppable, and he wants to tear us apart."
Lila's mind raced as she processed the situation. "We need to talk to him. We can't let him threaten us without a fight. He has to understand that Silvermoon is not going to back down." Torin's gaze softened, and for a moment, Lila saw the boy he used to be. The one who had never wanted the crown, who had never craved power. But that boy was gone. In his place stood the future Alpha King, and he was learning what it meant to lead.
"I'll meet with him,"
Torin said after a pause.
"But I need you with me. We can't afford to show weakness. I need you by my side, Lila. We're in this together."
Lila felt a surge of warmth at his words, but also a tinge of fear. This meeting with Garrett could change everything. If they didn't handle it correctly, it could spell disaster. Hours later, Torin and Lila stood in the grand hall, awaiting Garrett's arrival. The tension in the room was palpable. The doors creaked open, and in strode Alpha Garrett, his presence as imposing as ever. He was flanked by a handful of his loyal warriors, and his piercing gray eyes locked onto Torin with the cold intensity of a predator. Lila felt the weight of the moment. Garrett's very presence felt like a threat. His pack had always been a force to be reckoned with, but now, standing across from him, Lila understood the full extent of the power he wielded.
"Prince Torin,"
Garrett said, his voice smooth but laced with contempt.
"I see you've brought your little mate with you."
He glanced briefly at Lila, his eyes cold and dismissive.
"How quaint. The servant and the prince. It's a shame you won't be able to keep up this little charade for much longer."
Lila bristled at his words, but Torin remained composed, his voice steady as he spoke.
"We're not here for your insults, Garrett. What do you want?"
Garrett's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes.
"I'm here to offer you a choice, Prince. Abdicate, step aside, and I'll allow you and your little pack to survive. But if you refuse..."
He trailed off,
his smile turning to something darker.
Then war is inevitable. Lila stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't let Torin face this alone. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to back down now. "You're threatening war over your own ambition," Lila said, her voice steady. "You don't care about the pack. You only care about yourself." Garrett turned his gaze to her, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Ah, the little half-breed speaks. How charming." He raised an eyebrow. "Do you really think your voice matters, little one? You're nothing but a servant. And now you're playing queen. How pathetic." Lila's chest tightened at his words, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I may have started as a servant, but I'm no longer that person. I'm the Luna Queen, and I will protect this pack with everything I have."
"You will not tear us apart." Garrett's smile faltered slightly, but his confidence remained. "We'll see how long that resolve lasts, Luna." He glanced at Torin. "The decision is yours, Prince. Step aside and save your pack, or refuse and watch it burn." Torin stood tall, his eyes burning with determination. "I will never step aside for you, Garrett. This is my pack, and I will not let you destroy it for your own gain. If you want war, then we'll have war." The tension in the room thickened, and Lila could feel the air crackling with energy. The moment of truth had arrived. Garrett's next words would determine the future of their pack. The room fell into a heavy silence as Garrett's gaze narrowed, his lips curling into a sneer. "So be it," he said softly, his voice dripping with malice. "You've made your choice, Torin, and now you'll pay the price." With a flick of his wrist, Garrett signaled for his warriors to step forward. The tension in the room reached a boiling point, and Lila's instinct screamed for her to act. "Torin!" she called out, stepping forward. "We can't fight them like this. They're not just wolves. They're wolves with an agenda. We need to find another way." Torin's golden eyes flashed with frustration, but he met her gaze, his voice low and steady. "I know, but this is my fight, Lila. I won't back down now." Before Lila could respond, something deep within her stirred. The Omega Prime bloodline, a power she had yet to fully understand, began to hum with energy. She could feel the bond between her and Torin, the connection that had grown stronger with each passing day. And now, that bond pulsed with an undeniable force, a surge of power that coursed through her veins like wildfire. Her hand rose on its own, and as she extended it toward the warriors, a wave of calming energy radiated from her palm. She wasn't sure how it was happening, but she could feel the power growing inside her. She focused all of her will into projecting peace, stopping the violence before it could begin. To her surprise, the warriors hesitated. Their growls softened, and the tension in the room dissipated, as if the air itself had been drained of aggression. Garrett's eyes widened in shock as his warriors faltered, their bodies shifting uncertainly. "What is this?" he growled, his voice laced with disbelief. "What are you doing?" Lila didn't answer him. Instead, she focused on the pack around her. The power surged again, but this time, it was different. It wasn't just calming.
It was commanding. Every wolf in the room could feel it. Her power, her authority. They were compelled to listen, compelled to acknowledge her place in their world. "This is the power of the Omega Prime," Lila said, her voice steady as she looked directly at Garrett. "This is the strength of the bloodline you underestimated. You will not have this pack, not while I stand here." For the first time, Garrett looked unsure, and Lila could feel his fear begin to seep through the bond. The power of the Omega Prime was real, and she was just beginning to understand its full potential. "Step back," Lila commanded, her voice like steel. The pack doesn't belong to you. It belongs to Torin and me." With that, the warriors stepped back, their postures shifting from aggression to submission. Garrett's eyes flickered with a mixture of rage and realization. He hadn't anticipated this, hadn't expected Lila's power to be this overwhelming. But she wasn't finished. The true fight was still ahead. "This pack belongs to us," Lila repeated, her voice unwavering. "And we will protect it from anyone who tries to destroy it." Garrett didn't speak again. Instead, he turned sharply, signaling for his warriors to retreat. The threat had been temporarily averted, but Lila knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of a war that would test everything she and Torin had fought for. As tensions rise, Lila and Torin will have to navigate not only their bond, but the shifting political landscape. Will their newfound strength be enough to protect their future? Or will enemies from every corner of the kingdom tear them apart? Stay tuned as the battle for the throne intensifies. The tension in the air was thick, like a storm waiting to break. For weeks, the Silver Moon Pack had been on the brink of war, their fates intertwined with the ambitious plans of Alpha Garrett and the looming threat of the Iron Ridge Pack. Now, as the dawn of a new era approached, Lila and Torin found themselves at the heart of a decision that could either unite their people or tear them apart. Lila stood by Torin in the grand hall of Silver Moon's palace, watching the steady stream of wolves filing in from the various neighboring packs. Some came out of respect, others for political gain, and still others, like Garrett's former allies, came with a darker purpose: to test their strength. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on Lila's shoulders. She wasn't just Torin's mate now. She was his Luna, the embodiment of their future. And more than anything, the fate of the pack depended on her. The Omega Prime bloodline, once a mystery, now thrummed within her, a constant reminder that the power she had inherited was more than just a title. It was her weapon, her voice, her way to protect what mattered most. "Are you ready?" Torin's voice cut through the silence, his deep tone carrying the weight of their shared purpose. His golden eyes locked with hers, filled with determination and a quiet fear. Despite everything they'd been through, this moment was unlike any other. Lila met his gaze, her heart racing. She had never imagined herself standing at the heart of this political storm. She had once been a servant, hidden in the shadows of the pack. But now, as Luna Queen, her role was clear. She had to bring unity to the packs, to forge an alliance strong enough to end the threat that Alpha Garrett and his followers posed. "I don't know if I can ever truly be ready for this," Lila said softly, her words tinged with uncertainty. "But I know we have to try. For all of us." Torin reached for her hand, his grip firm and unwavering. "We will do this together. You've already shown the world your strength, Lila. Now we need to show them that the power of the Omega Prime can bring peace, not just destruction." She nodded, her mind swirling with everything they had learned about the political landscape, the alliances, the risks, and the dangers. Today, she wasn't just standing beside Torin. She was the one who would help lead them into the future. Her Omega Prime powers, which had been nothing more than a whisper of potential when she first discovered them, were now a beacon of legitimacy. It was time for her to take the lead in this negotiation. As the leaders of the neighboring packs gathered in the palace's grand hall, Lila couldn't help but notice the mix of suspicion and intrigue in their eyes. Some wolves still regarded her as a half-breed, a servant turned Luna Queen, while others were eager to see how the Omega Prime bloodline would play into the future of the packs. Torin stepped forward first,
his presence commanding attention as he addressed the room. Today, we stand on the precipice of war, but also on the edge of something new. A new era for the Silver Moon Pack, and for all of us. His voice rang out with authority, making it clear that there was no turning back. He continued, Lila and I are here today not just to negotiate for peace, but to show you what we can build together. The Silver Moon Pack is stronger than it's ever been, and we want to share that strength with you. The murmurs from the other pack leaders were a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. None of them had ever seen the full extent of Lila's power as Omega Prime, and today was the day she would show them. Lila's heart pounded in her chest as Torin nodded to her, signaling that it was time. I have not always been a queen, Lila began, her voice clear and strong, surprising even herself. I have not always been anything more than a servant, but the bloodline that runs through me is older than the Silver Moon Pack itself. It is power, and it is my duty to use it to protect our future. And so today, I will demonstrate that power, not for my sake, but for the sake of unity. She stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room of pack leaders. Her pulse quickened as she called upon the Omega Prime power that had once felt so foreign to her. A deep breath, a centering of her mind, and then she released it. The energy that flowed through her was overwhelming, a force that filled the room and pushed against the walls of the hall. The power radiated from her body in waves, the same waves of calm that had once soothed her enemies now rippling outward with an undeniable strength. The room fell into silence as the wolves present felt the weight of her power, felt the connection between them and the ancient bloodline that pulsed through her veins. One by one, the pack leaders dropped to one knee, compelled by an ancient force, a truth they could not deny. The Omega Prime bloodline was not a myth. It was real, and Lila was its heir. As the last ripple of power faded, Lila stood tall, her chest rising and falling with each breath. Her gaze swept over the room, and she saw the astonished looks of the pack leaders. They were no longer questioning her legitimacy. They were feeling the weight of her power and acknowledging her right to lead. Torin stood beside her, his expression filled with pride and awe. This is the future, he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of the truth they had just shared with the world. This is what we can build together. Later that evening, the pack leaders gathered to discuss their decision, and Lila and Torin sat at the head of the table, their future uncertain, but their bond stronger than ever. The tension in the room had dissipated after Lila's display of power. But the political complexities of uniting the packs were far from over. Alpha Garrett of Iron Ridge was one of the last to speak, his voice filled with resistance. You think one display of power will make me bow to you? He sneered, his eyes filled with contempt. The Silver Moon Pack's time has passed. You and your half-breed mate will never lead the packs. You are an abomination. Lila felt a surge of anger, but Torin placed a hand on hers, his voice calm as he addressed Garrett. The packs don't belong to you, Garrett. Not anymore. You will learn to accept this reality. The room fell into uneasy silence as the other leaders looked between Garrett and the young prince, whose power and authority were undeniable. Later, as the night drew to a close and the leaders left the hall, Lila stood in the quiet of the palace, reflecting on what had transpired. The journey ahead was long and uncertain. They had made allies today, but there were still enemies in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike. Torin joined her, his presence a comforting weight beside her. You did it, Lila. You've shown them what you're capable of. She nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility that now rested on her shoulders. But there's more to do. This is just the beginning. Torin smiled, pulling her close. We'll face it together. You and me, and the Silver Moon Pack.
Lila looked out over the land that would soon be theirs to protect. The future was uncertain, but with Torin by her side, she knew they could weather any storm. The power of the Omega Prime bloodline was real, and it was hers to wield. Together, Lila whispered, the word carrying the promise of everything to come. As peace seems within reach, the pack's enemies are not done yet. The road to true unity will require Lila and Torin to face more than just political rivals. They must fight to keep their hard-won peace intact. Stay tuned as the battle for their future continues. The sun rose over the Silver Moon Pack's territory, casting its first light on the majestic palace where a new chapter of history was about to begin. The air was thick with anticipation as the grand hall echoed with the sounds of ceremony preparations. The coronation of Lila, the newly acknowledged Luna Queen, was just hours away. The pack, once divided, now stood united in their support for the couple who had defied the odds. Lila stood at the window of her chambers, watching the first rays of sunlight dance across the vast lands that were now hers to protect. This was the moment she had fought for, but it still felt surreal. She wasn't the scared servant girl anymore, afraid to speak her truth, afraid of what her bloodline would reveal. She was the Luna Queen, the mate of Prince Torin, the Omega Prime, the chosen one of the Moon Goddess. Her hand gently traced the silver crescent moon mark on her neck, the mark that had once been a symbol of her vulnerability, now a sign of her power. The mark was visible to everyone now. It glowed softly, a constant reminder of the bond she shared with Torin. The bond that had shaken the foundation of the Silver Moon Pack and proven that destiny, however cruel it might seem, had its own plans. "You're quiet." Torin's voice broke through her thoughts, drawing her attention. He stood at the door, watching her with a soft smile, his gaze filled with affection and pride. He had been her anchor throughout everything, the betrayal, the challenges, the power struggle. But now, as they stood at the precipice of this new chapter, there was something else in his eyes, an unwavering certainty about their future. Lila turned to him, her heart swelling with a mix of love and apprehension. "Just thinking," she said, her voice gentle, "about how far I've come, from a servant to this." Torin stepped closer, his presence filling the room with warmth and strength. "You've always been more than a servant, Lila. The Moon Goddess knew it. I knew it. But now, the entire pack knows it. They see you for who you truly are." Lila nodded, her heart fluttering at his words. It hadn't been an easy journey, but in the end, it was worth it. They had faced insurmountable odds, fought enemies both inside and outside their pack, and come out victorious. And now, they were about to cement their place as the true leaders of the Silver Moon Pack. "Today is the day we make it official," Torin said, a hint of humor in his voice. "The Luna Queen and the Crown Prince, united." Lila smiled softly, but her mind couldn't help but wander back to the turbulent past. She thought of Alpha Garrett, who had tried to destroy them both, of the political maneuvering, the challenges, and the bitter betrayals. But through it all, there had been one constant: Torin. His faith in her, his willingness to stand by her, had kept her going. Now, they were stronger than ever. "I never imagined any of this," Lila admitted, stepping toward him. "I never imagined that I would have a place here, in this pack, at your side. That I would be the Luna Queen." Torin cupped her face, his expression soft but filled with conviction. "You've earned it. The pack respects you, Lila. They follow you, just as I do. You are my equal,
my mate, my Luna. Lila's eyes softened, and she leaned into his touch, letting the moment wash over her. She had spent her life in the shadows, trying to blend in, to remain invisible. Now, she was about to step into the light, not just as Torin's mate, but as the leader of their people. The weight of it was overwhelming, but with Torin by her side, she knew she could do it. The coronation ceremony was set to take place in the Grand Hall, where the entire Silver Moon Pack had gathered. The vast room was decorated with banners bearing the silver crescent moon, the symbol of their unity and strength. The air was alive with the whispers of the pack as they awaited the arrival of the royal couple. Lila stood in front of the full-length mirror, her reflection staring back at her. She was dressed in an elegant gown of deep blue and silver, the fabric flowing gracefully around her as she turned. The intricate design of the gown mirrored the Silver Moon Pack's colors, symbolizing her new role. Her hair was braided, woven with delicate silver threads that sparkled in the light. The crown, simple yet regal, sat atop her head, a symbol of her rightful place as Luna Queen. She took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions coursing through her. "I'm ready," she whispered to herself. Torin entered the room, his dark eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood there, their bond humming with a silent understanding. Then, Torin's lips curved into a soft smile, his gaze filled with pride. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice low. Lila smiled back, her heart swelling at his words. "Thank you, but this isn't just about me, Torin. This is about us, about the future we're building together." Torin nodded, his expression turning serious. "Together," he repeated, taking her hand in his. "Let's do this." The ceremony was grand, with wolves from all over the pack watching as Lila took her place beside Torin. The air was thick with anticipation as the elder wolves began the official rites, welcoming Lila into her new role as Luna Queen. But as the ceremony progressed, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The pack's loyalty had been tested, and today they were officially acknowledging her power, her leadership, and her bond with Torin. When it was her turn to speak, Lila stepped forward, her heart racing as the pack fell silent. "I stand before you today," she began, her voice steady and strong. "Not as a servant, not as a half-breed, but as your Luna Queen. I have learned what it means to fight for what is right, to fight for this pack, and most importantly, to fight for our future. The bond I share with Prince Torin is not just a bond of love, but of power, of unity, of the strength that we will need to face whatever comes next." A murmur of approval rippled through the pack, and Lila's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and relief. She wasn't just speaking to them. She was speaking for them. And as the words left her mouth, she felt the bond between her and Torin grow stronger, more tangible. "Together, we will protect the Silver Moon Pack. Together, we will unite all the packs under our leadership, and together, we will build a future where all wolves, no matter their bloodline, can thrive." The hall erupted in applause, and Lila's eyes met Torin's, his gaze full of pride and love. This was the moment they had both worked so hard for. They were no longer just a prince and a servant. They were rulers, partners in every sense of the word. Later that evening, as the celebration began to wind down, Lila found herself alone on the balcony overlooking the vast land that would now be hers to protect. The moon hung high above them, casting a silver glow over everything. Torin joined her, his presence comforting as ever. "You were amazing today," he said softly, his voice full of admiration. Lila turned to face him, her heart beating faster. I couldn't have done it without you, Torin. You've been my strength, my guide. I never thought I'd be here, standing at the center of all of this. Torin smiled, his golden eyes shining with pride. You're more than capable of leading, Lila. You've already proven it. For a moment, they stood there, their hands intertwined, the weight of the future heavy but comforting. They had faced so many obstacles together, but now, for the first time, Lila felt a sense of peace. The bond between them was unbreakable, and she knew that whatever challenges came next, they would face them as one. Our journey isn't over, Torin said, his voice firm. There will be more trials, more enemies to face. But as long as we stand together, we can conquer anything. Lila nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Together, she whispered. We'll face everything together. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Lila was not afraid. She had found her place in the world, not just as Torin's mate, but as Luna Queen. She had earned her position, and now she would fight for it, for the pack, for the future. And as the moonlight bathed the land in its silvery glow, Lila knew one thing for certain. The dawn of a new era had arrived. With Lila now confirmed as Luna Queen, the road to peace and unity is just beginning. But the challenges ahead are many. Stay tuned as the future of the Silver Moon Pack unfolds.